There's about $3.6 billion of it that could come from military construction efforts, including construction of a middle school in Kentucky, housing for military families, improvements for bases like Camp Pendleton and Hanscom Air Force Base. Aren't you concerned that some of these projects that were part of legislation that you helped approve in Congress are now going to possibly be cut out?
Well, the president will have to make a decision where to get the money. Let's just say for a moment that he took some money out of the military construction budget. I would say it's better for the middle school kids in Kentucky to have a secure border. We'll get them the school they need, but right now we got a national emergency on our hands.
It's
just beyond.
It's beyond. I mean, you know, Lindsey Graham actually over the past 2 months, he's shown. I've known the guy since '94. He's shown his worst traits. He is constantly unmoored, whether it's intellectually. He can go from being a conservative to a moderate liberal. He's all over the place. He's a John McCain maverick. He calls Donald Trump during the campaign, says that he's mentally unbalanced. He says that Republicans will destroy themselves if they elect Donald Trump, and they will deserve to be destroyed. He stands by John McCain. John McCain passes, and then he stands with a man who mocks and ridicules John McCain and still mocks and ridicules John McCain.
Nothing.
I would ask, who is this Lindsey Graham? But unfortunately, it's the same Lindsey Graham that's been flipping and flopping like a mullet in the interstate mullet toss at Floribama contest for years now. He just flips and flops and flips and flops. And Sam Stein, to declare a national emergency, as Lindsey Graham just did, or to say, he's right, we've got a national emergency, when I will say again what we say every day. Donald Trump's 3 arguments are just specious. No national emergency because we have the lowest number of illegal crossings in half a century, in 50 years, since Lindsey Graham was in grade school, right? Drugs, we keep hearing drugs are pouring over the border. As we say, and as Chris Wallace said, 80 to 90% of those drugs come through legal ports of entry. There is absolutely nothing that Stephen Miller and Donald Trump can do to change those statistics, which comes from their government. And finally, crimes. Crimes are committed by a much higher percentage of people who were native-born, like Stephen Miller and Lindsey Graham, than from immigrants coming to the United States. Uncontrovertible. And again, from Donald Trump's own administration, their statistics.
Yeah. Joe, did you say a mullet toss in Alabama? I couldn't understand that.
It's hard to keep up.
Well, you have the
I just want to clarify that part first before
Sam.
You have what's called an interstate mullet toss every year at the Floribama, and there's a technique. You fold the mullets, and then you see who can throw them the furthest from the Florida line.
It's not the mullet that you wore in high school,
Alabama.
Sam.
Yeah,
right. I got you.
Okay.
We should build a wall around that, I think.
Okay.
So to your point, there's a lot of misdirection here. Obviously, we do not have an emergency.
Now, by misdirection, by misdirection, you mean lying? Yeah, let's just call it lying.
And then, but secondly, to see Trump get up there and say, I didn't have to do this right now, just undermines the entirety of the emergency argument. Of course, that might not have as much legal problems as people are saying, but politically, it's a disastrous admission. But I think the bigger story that we're sort of getting at here is just the acquiescence of Republicans in Congress, not just Lindsey Graham, which we've touched upon here, but Mitch McConnell, who has proclaimed himself to be an institutionalist, was the one who announced this deal and then announced his support for an emergency declaration. What Congress is essentially doing here, or at least Republicans in Congress are doing here, they're saying what the appropriations process that we hold so dear, which gives us so much power as a co-equal branch of government, we are going to cede at least a portion of that to the president. And they're essentially just taking away their own authorities, and for no other reason other than they're scared that the president might hurt them in a primary challenge. And so this is problematic for the Republican Party now, but it's going to be problematic down the road, I think, because the next time a Democrat is president, there's a precedent that they can look to and say, you know what, you declared it for a non-existent national emergency at the southern border. Well, look, climate change actually is causing huge amount of catastrophe and problems. Gun violence has caused tens of thousands of deaths. We really do have national emergencies here, and you have no standing to say that I can't evoke these charters anymore. And that's going to be a problem down the road for Republicans.
Eddie, you have Republicans that are concerned about Donald Trump in the primary. Of course, they should look back to see what happened in November of 2018, to see how that worked out for him. Mm-hmm. The worst loss in terms of lost seats since 1974, the worst popular vote loss in the history of this republic. And I'm just curious, Lindsey Graham's feeling awfully good about that border wall, a fake emergency, saying that kids in Mitch McConnell's state don't need money for schools, that they should use this money on a phony wall that Mitch McConnell, when he was in charge for 2 years, along with Paul Ryan, didn't spend a dime on because they knew it was a stupid idea. I understand Mitch may be scared of being primaried by Matt Bevin or somebody else. I wonder how general election voters in the state of Kentucky are going to feel about Mitch McConnell taking money away, as Lindsey Graham said. Mitch McConnell taking money away from schools in Kentucky for this imaginary phony wall that he could have funded himself when he and Paul Ryan were in power for 2 years.
You know, Joe, I think you're absolutely right in this regard. I'm not sure what the political calculus is, what's driving the fear. It's probably around being primaried, but I don't think they're looking towards the general election. But you've interviewed on this show the authors of How Democracies Die. And one of the claims of that book isn't just simply about the autocrat or the figure who emerges, who comes and undermines norms. It's about the complicity of elites, political elites, in allowing for those norms and those institutions to be eroded. And so what we see here in this crisis, in interesting sorts of ways, is the leadership of the Republican Party and even those backbenchers supporting Trump's old constitutional overreach. And in this way, I think this is really important for us to say. What we're seeing here is the imperial presidency gone amok. Many of us have been complaining over the years about the expansion of executive power. We wondered and we worried that if you had a person who occupied the office, who had no ethical backbone, who wasn't committed to constitutional principles, what they would do if they had access to that kind of power. And now we're here. And so what we have is a president who's pursuing a policy that's basically racist, in my view, who's engaged in a constitutional overreach in order to pursue that racist policy. And we have elites in Congress, particularly the Republican Party, who are signing off on it. We are in deep trouble, Joe.
So within all this, we're going to try and figure out what happens next. Also still ahead on Morning Joe, we'll show you those awkward moments from Mike Pence and